Making a lot of money and becoming famous at a young age can be exciting and thrilling. But that wasn't the reason Kristy McNichol did what she did. If you grew up watching television in the late 70s or early 80s, there's a good chance Kristy McNichol was once in your living room. She had something that was almost impossible to fake. A naturalness, a warmth, and an emotional honesty that many adult actors spend a lifetime trying to achieve. And then one day, she was simply gone. No big farewell, no dramatic exit. She just quietly stepped away from the spotlight. Today, we're taking a closer look at what really happened to Kristy McNichol, the girl from Los Angeles. Kristina Ann McNichol was born on September 11, 1962, in Los Angeles, California. Her father, James, was a carpenter. Her mother, Carolyn, was a registered nurse who raised Kristy and her two brothers, Jimmy and Tommy, after the family separated when Kristy was just 3 years old. By the time she was about 6, she had already appeared in her first commercial. It wasn't an accident. From a very early age, Kristy's mother recognized her daughter's talent and took on the role of managing her career herself. Kristy never experienced the kind of ordinary childhood where a neighborhood kid stepped into childhood and the entertainment industry at almost the same time. And for Kristy, those two worlds were never truly separate. Growing up in a single-parent household, with her mother raising 3 children while also guiding their emerging careers, responsibility and pressure arrived early. Her brother Jimmy was pursuing acting as well. And both siblings were working steadily long before most children their age had even begun to imagine what they wanted to become. Their home was loving but far from conventional, structured around shooting schedules, callbacks, and casting appointments. It looked nothing like the suburban family dramas Kristy would later portray on screen. Throughout the early 1970s, she appeared in guest roles on several popular television series, steadily becoming a familiar face to American audiences. Those early opportunities came in part through family friend Desi Arnaz, who helped open a few important doors at the beginning of her career. In 1974, Kristy landed her first regular role on a television series when she was cast as Patricia Apple on the CBS family drama Apple's Way. Although the show lasted only 1 season, it placed her name in front of producers and casting directors in a way that truly mattered. Even during those early years, people on set sensed something different about her. Kristy didn't approach scenes the way many child actors did, simply hitting marks, reciting lines, and waiting for direction. She was fully present, genuinely listening and responding in the moment. What most young performers spend years learning to imitate seemed to come naturally to her. That quality, difficult to define yet unmistakable, either exists in a performer or it doesn't. In Kristy McNichol, it was evident from the very beginning. Then, in 1976, came the role that changed everything, when she was cast as Letitia "Buddy" Lawrence in the ABC drama series Family. She was only 13 years old when she took on the role. The show centered on the Lawrence family, a middle-class household living in suburban California, but the issues they faced were far from simple or comfortable. At a time when most television preferred lighter, safer storylines, family confronted divorce, illness, questions of identity, and grief without turning away. It brought a level of emotional honesty to primetime TV that was rare for that era. And at the heart of it all was Buddy, the teenage daughter portrayed by Kristy. Surrounded by seasoned actors playing her parents and other family members, she was the one audiences returned for week after week. There was no sense of artifice in her performance. She wasn't merely acting out emotions. She seemed to live inside them. Each episode captured what it truly felt like to be a teenager trying to make sense of a world moving faster than she could process. The series also explored themes considered bold for late 1970s primetime, including storylines involving a gay character, something that was far from common on television at the time. For a young girl privately grappling with her own identity, Working with material that at least acknowledged the existence of people like her must have carried a particular weight. The industry took notice. Kristy was nominated for the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series 3 consecutive years, 1977, 1978, and 1979, winning in 1977 and again in 1979. Her first win came on the night of her 15th birthday, September 11, 1977. 1980, as the show began to wind down, she received another Emmy nomination, this time for one of the most recognized young actresses in America. In 1978, Kristy and her brother Jimmy recorded an album together, released on RCA Records and produced by Phil Margo and Mitch Margo. The album included a cover of a hit song by the Chiffons, along with a single titled Page by Page. The siblings promoted the album at Studio 54 in New York, a venue that perfectly captured that moment in American pop culture. They also appeared together in the Carpenters' 1978 holiday special, A Christmas Portrait. For a time, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. But beneath the surface of that success, things were already more complicated than they appeared. And for Kristy, what she truly loved was the rolling of the camera. The scenes, the shared emotion between people, unfolding honestly in front of the lens for everyone to see. The weight of growing up in public. If you ask most people what being a teenager feels like, they'll talk about confusion, self-doubt, trying to figure out who they are, making mistakes in private and hoping no one notices. Kristy McNichol had none of that. Adolescence unfolded in front of cameras, across the covers of teen magazines, on talk show stages, and in the pages of entertainment columns that followed her everywhere. As she appeared on The Mike Douglas Show, on Dina, and made multiple appearances on Battle of the Network Stars. She was rarely out of the public eye. Her face was familiar to millions of households across America. Being a beloved celebrity is something many people dream about. Living that reality as a child, without any real reference point for what a normal life looks like, is something else entirely. Later, Kristy spoke candidly about that time. The constant rejection that comes with auditions, the relentless pressure to perform, the absence of a typical school experience, and the sense that she had little control over her own schedule or decisions. As she never went to her prom. She didn't attend school the way other kids did. The entertainment industry moved at its own relentless pace, and her life moved with it, whether she was ready or not. Years later, she reflected on that time with striking honesty. All the rejection, all the ups and downs of her career, not having a real childhood, growing up in a broken home, not going to school, not going to prom, constantly being told what to do without having any real say in her own life. It wasn't just a busy schedule. It was a youth shaped by other people's decisions. But there was something else she carried privately during those years, something she wouldn't speak about publicly for decades. Kristy McNichol is gay, and growing up in that industry in that era, she felt she had no choice but to hide it. Maintaining that silence day after day added another layer of pressure to a life that was already demanding. It became one of the quiet burdens that wore her down over time, while the public only ever saw the surface of her success. In June 1980, Family ended its 5-season run. Kristy was just 17 years old, standing at what appeared from the outside to be the beginning of an even bigger chapter, a move into film. In the years that followed, she transitioned to feature films, choosing roles that revealed real ambition and a desire to expand her range as an actress. Her film debut had technically come in 1978 when she appeared in the dark comedy The End, starring Burt Reynolds. That same year, she took on a leading role in the acclaimed television movie Summer of My German Soldier, playing a young Jewish girl in wartime Georgia who hides a German prisoner of war. It was a demanding role for any actress, especially a 15-year-old. Yet she handled it with the same emotional depth she had brought to Buddy. The film that truly expanded her audience, however, was Little Darlings in 1980. The movie co-starred Tatum O'Neal, along with Matt Dillon and a very young Cynthia Nixon in supporting roles. It followed two teenage girls from very different social backgrounds who meet at summer camp and make a bet about who will lose her virginity first. The premise was delicate and potentially controversial, and critics were divided in their reactions. Kristy had first choice of the lead roles and selected Angel, the streetwise girl from a tougher background. She brought a vulnerability to the character that grounded the film emotionally, and her performance was a key reason it worked as well as it did. A Little Darlings earned over $34 million at the box office against a budget of approximately $5.3 million. A strong return that signaled real commercial appeal, not just critical goodwill. For her performance, Kristy won a People's Choice Award. She was only 18 years old. In 1981, she appeared in two more feature films. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, alongside Dennis Quaid and Mark Hamill, and Neil Simon's Only When I Laugh, starring Marsha Mason. Her role in the latter earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actress, recognition that showed she was Simon was one of the most respected writers in American theater and film at the time, and Marsha Mason was an Academy Award-nominated actress. Yet Kristy held her own on screen. She was building a legitimate film career. And then, quietly, things began to unravel. "I just needed to find the simple life that I think I lost for a while," she later said. In 1982, while filming the comedy drama Just the Way You Are in France, she broke down. She later described the experience with painful honesty. She couldn't sleep. She cried the entire time she was there. Years of relentless professional pressure, the absence of a real private life, and the physical and emotional toll of never having the chance to simply be a person, it all came crashing down at once. There wasn't a single incident that caused it. It was the accumulated weight of everything. The years she had spent in the industry, the things she had never been allowed to say, the person she had never been allowed to fully be. All of it had built up. At the time, it was widely described as an emotional breakdown, and production on Just the Way You Are was halted. The film was eventually completed and released in 1984, but by then, Kristy had almost entirely stepped away from the spotlight. Looking back, she explained that the breakdown came from multiple directions at once. It was the pressure of a career that had begun before she was old enough to truly understand what she was choosing. It was the impossibility of living a normal life when every part of your day is managed and observed. And it was years of carrying burdens she never let the public see. "People think I must have been on drugs or something," she said. "But when you're young, all of that is enough to make you crack." The industry, however, was not especially forgiving. When she returned to work, opportunities had noticeably narrowed. Producers and studios had concerns about reliability. She completed Just the Way You Are, then appeared in Dream Lover and Women of Valor in 1986, followed by smaller roles in You Can't Hurry Love and Two Moon Junction in 1988. She was still working, but the momentum she had built in the early 1980s never truly returned. The path ahead was clearly narrower than the one she had been on before France. The years she spent in the entertainment industry, the things she was never allowed to say, the person she was never free to fully be. All of it gradually built up. At the time, the media described it as an emotional breakdown, and production on Just the Way You Are was halted. The film was eventually completed and released in 1984, but by then, Kristy had largely stepped away from the spotlight. Looking back, she explained that the collapse came from several directions at once. It was the pressure of a career that had begun before she was old enough to truly understand what she was choosing. It was the impossibility of having a normal life when every part of her day was managed and monitored. And it was years of carrying burdens she never revealed to the public. "People think I must have been on drugs or something," she said. "But when you're young, that alone is enough to make you crack." The industry, however, was not very forgiving. When she returned to work, Opportunities had significantly narrowed. Producers and studios expressed concerns about reliability. She completed Just the Way You Are, then appeared in Dream Lover and Women of Valor in 1986, followed by smaller roles in You Can't Hurry Love and Two Moon Junction in 1988. She was still working, but the momentum she had built in the early 1980s never truly returned. The road ahead was clearly much narrower than it had been before France. "I had to choose between continuing the show and being well," she said at the time. "It was the hardest decision I have ever made." The diagnosis was bipolar disorder, a condition marked by cycles of elevated and depressive episodes. It is treatable, but it requires consistent care and stability, two things that are difficult to maintain in the high-pressure, unpredictable environment of television production. Schedules constantly shift, deadlines are relentless, and the emotional demands of performing never ease. In 1992, public understanding of mental health was still limited, and the stigma surrounding psychiatric conditions was far greater than it is today. For many people watching the news then, hearing that a well-known actress had left a hit show because of a mental health diagnosis was something they simply didn't have a framework to understand. It wasn't just a career move, it was a revelation many weren't prepared for. For Kristy, however, the diagnosis brought clarity. It gave a name to what she had been experiencing for years: the emotional volatility, the struggle to maintain consistency, the periods when everything felt overwhelming and impossible. Now there was an explanation. Managing it meant making a choice, to prioritize her health over her career. And she made that choice without looking back. She returned for the final episode of Empty Nest in 1995. And for many viewers, that was the last time they saw her in an on-screen acting role. After that, she provided voice work for characters in the animated series Extreme Ghostbusters in 1997 and Invasion America in 1998. But as a visible presence on television and film screens, her era had essentially come to an end. "I really never stopped and took a break and got to know me," she once reflected. Then, in June 2001, Kristy McNichol made it official. Through her publicist, she released a statement announcing her retirement from acting. She was 38 years old and had spent roughly 24 years in the business, longer than many people stay in any single profession, and she had begun working before she was even old enough to drive. The statement was direct and deeply moving in its clarity. She said it was time to take on the biggest role of her life, herself. She acknowledged that fans might be disappointed, but she was honest that the decision was necessary for her personal happiness and well-being. There was no ambiguity, no hint that this was a temporary break. She wasn't stepping away for a while. She was truly done. She was done, and she was at peace with it. There was no scandal, no public feud, no dramatic final act. She simply decided she had given enough of herself to the camera, and that the rest of her life needed to belong to her. For those who had grown up watching her, the announcement felt bittersweet. But in hindsight, it was an extraordinary act of self-awareness from someone who had spent most of her life making choices based on what others needed from her. What followed was not a story of disappearance, but of rebuilding. After stepping away from acting, Kristy took a job teaching drama at a private school in Los Angeles, passing on what she had learned over decades to younger students. She didn't vanish from the craft, she redirected it. All those years of learning how to find truth in a character, how to be still in front of a camera, how to let emotion surface naturally rather than forcing it, she turned that knowledge into guidance for others. She also devoted time to charity work, traveled, and allowed herself to rest in ways she never had during the decades when her life had been governed by production schedules and deadlines. There were no more call sheets dictating her days. The rhythm of her life was finally her own. And in that quiet shift, she found something she had long been missing: the space to simply live for herself. In 2011, She enrolled in the music program at Los Angeles Valley College and joined the school choir. It wasn't a publicity move or a staged comeback. There were no cameras, no announcements. She was simply someone who loved to sing, sitting in rehearsals alongside others who felt the same, doing it for one uncomplicated reason. It made her happy. As she also became involved with the Los Angeles Valley College Foundation, helping raise funds to keep the music program alive, and she took that responsibility seriously. In 2015, she said she never wanted to see the program cut due to lack of funding, because that would be the saddest thing imaginable. Music, she believed, truly helps young people. For a woman who had given so much of her own youth to an industry that demanded everything from her, choosing to protect something that genuinely nourishes young people says a great deal. Then, in January 2012, she sat down for an interview with People magazine and shared something she had kept private for most of her adult life. She publicly came out as gay and introduced her long-term partner, Marty Allen, with whom she had been living since the early 1990s. Marty was a teacher, not a public figure. Together, they had built a quiet life that looked nothing like the one Kristy had known during her years in the entertainment industry. The announcement came without drama or fanfare, just a direct and honest statement from a woman who had carried something in silence for a long time and decided it was finally time to put it down. Kristy said she chose to speak publicly because she wanted to help young people who were being bullied because of their sexual orientation. At 50 years old, she still thought about what it might have meant to see someone like herself reflected honestly in the world when she was young, what it might have changed, what burden it might have lifted from someone who needed that visibility. The response was largely supportive. Many who had followed her career for decades felt it confirmed something they had sensed all along, that the depth she brought to her performances came from someone who understood firsthand what it meant to move through life carrying parts of yourself you couldn't show to the world. In 2014, she spoke to People magazine again, continuing to share her story with the same calm clarity. She never entirely closed the door on acting, but she no longer let it define her. Kristy described her home life as happy and serene. She spoke about her love of singing, her affection for Hawaii, and her miniature dachshunds. When asked about returning to acting, she said she would never completely rule it out, but made it clear that what she has now is something she deeply values. I left show business for a variety of reasons, she said, but a big one was my interest in learning what else there is in life. She added, I needed to find the simple life that I think I lost for a while, and I think I found it again. And for her, that seemed to be enough. Looking at the full arc of what Kristy McNichol accomplished, it's remarkable in both directions. She entered the entertainment industry before she was old enough to truly choose it. She worked at the highest levels of television and film for more than 2 decades. She won 2 Emmy Awards before she was 17, earned Golden Globe nominations, a People's Choice Award, and the genuine affection of an enormous audience that has never quite forgotten her. She also survived something that many people in her position did not come through intact, the particular pressure of an industry that asks everything of you while offering no framework for the parts of life that matter most. Privacy, stability, identity, rest. She endured a breakdown, received a diagnosis that reshaped how she understood her own history, and spent years living in ways that didn't fully reflect who she truly was. And eventually she chose to stop. Not because she failed, but because she understood herself well enough to know what she needed. That kind of clarity is rare, especially in someone who had spent nearly her entire life being shaped by what others expected from her. Most people in her position either keep going until something forces them to stop, or they disappear without explanation. She did neither. She was deliberate about her decision and honest about why. The work she left behind, On Family, Summer of My German Soldier, Little Darlings, and Only When I Laugh, still holds up. The performances remain genuine, specific, and grounded in something real. It wasn't just technique. It was the presence of someone who understood deeply and personally what it meant to grow up too fast, to carry hidden burdens, and ultimately to choose a life that reflected who she truly was. The audiences who grew up watching her films and television shows still carry those memories with them. There was something uniquely truthful in the way she portrayed Buddy Lawrence, a feeling that lingered long after each episode ended. It never felt like you were watching someone perform adolescence. It felt like you were witnessing a real one unfold. And the life she built afterward, with her partner, her music, her choir, her teaching, and her charity work, stands as a different kind of legacy, quieter but just as meaningful. In an industry where burning bright and fading fast has almost become a tradition, she chose another path. She stepped away from the spotlight and walked toward something quieter, and found what she had been searching for. Not everyone who leaves fame does so peacefully. Many spend years questioning their decision, waiting for a comeback that never arrives, or defining themselves by what they left behind. Kristy McNichol did none of that. She built a life that was real, private, and truly her own. And by all accounts, she has been content with it. If you grew up watching her, you probably sensed there was always more to her than what the camera revealed. Now you know a little more of that story. If this brought back memories, consider liking and subscribing for more stories like this.